Hi, in this video we'll be looking at how to find one of the endpoints of a line segment if you're given the other endpoint and the midpoint. So we're going to be doing this in two ways so that you can pick whichever way you prefer. We're going to be looking at this using algebra, and we're also going to look at this in a more visual way. So let's make sure that you have that choice to do either one. All right, so let's start with an algebraic method. All right, so we know the formula for midpoint, and if you don't know the formula for midpoint, you might want to go ahead and review that before you get to this video. So in order to find midpoint, you have to average the x's, and that's the x coordinate, and then you have to find the average of the y's, and that will give you the y coordinate of the midpoint. So in order to find an endpoint, if you have the midpoint, this is just working backwards. As you know, working backwards is really just algebra in math. All right, so now let's first focus on the x's. So we have an x over here, we have an x over here, we have the formula for the midpoint x. So this is the midpoint, and I'm going to say of x for short, so mx as midpoint of x for short, and I'm going to call this x1 for short, the first x. So the midpoint of x is equal to x1 plus x2 over 2. And that's just coming from right here. I didn't change anything, I'm just focusing on the x's. Now continuing, the midpoint of x we actually do know, it's negative 10. So I have negative 10 is equal to x1, we also know, it's 2. So it's equal to 2 plus x2, which we don't know, over 2. Now in order to solve this, the first thing we have to do, since that's divided by 2, we have to start by multiplying by 2. Whatever we do to one side, we do to the other side, and we get that negative 20 is equal to 2 plus x2. All right, from there, we want to get x2 alone, so we have to subtract 2 to get rid of it. Whatever we do to one side, we do to the other side, and we get that x2 is equal to negative 22. And we're done. So remember that x2 is just the second x. We see now that the second x is negative 22. So now let's keep going and do the same thing for y, and we'll go a little bit faster as we work on the y's. So I'm going to highlight in green. Oop, that is not a highlighter. Let's try this again. All right, green. So that represents the y's. That's the y formula. This is my. This is y1, and we're looking for y2. So the formula here is my is equal to y1 plus y2 over 2. And again, that's just coming from that formula here. This is not the visual way. I'm in the wrong spot, so let's move that over. There we go. And so from there, we can plug in what we know. So we know that my, let's make this a little smaller, all the way up here, we know that my is 7. So we can go ahead and put that there. 7 is equal to, we know that y1 is equal to negative 1. So negative 1 plus y2, which we don't know, over 2. We multiply both sides by 2, we get that 14 is equal to negative 1 plus y2, and then we add 1 to both sides to get that y2 is equal to 15. So now we have both of our answers. We have our x2, we have our y2. So we see that the coordinates of the other endpoint is negative 22, x first, comma, 15, y next. And that's our answer, and that's how we do it algebraically. At this point, you can stop the video, you can move on. If you like the algebra and you don't want to see the visual, feel free to shut me down. However, if you're not a fan of algebra and you want to see an alternate way, keep watching. All right, so here we have, let's make a little bit of room here. Okay, so let's focus on the y's first once again. So, no, sorry, let's focus on the x's first once again. All right, so we know the midpoint of the x's is negative 10. And that's just coming from right here. We know that one of the x coordinates is more than that. It's over here at 2. That's coming from right here. So if I figure out the space between those 2 points, I have from negative 1 to 2, they're 12 units. So I can do that by counting, I can do that by subtracting. I just know that from negative 10, counting all the way up to 2, you get 12 units. So now if I want to know what happens if I go backwards, I have to count backwards 12 units. So going back from negative 10 over 12 spaces, so we're going 12 spaces here, we get to negative 22. And that's how we figure out the x coordinate. X coordinate, or x2, I'll call it, equals negative 22. And now we can do the same thing, visualizing a number line for the y's. So if we have a number line for the y's, or middle is at 7, and we know that from right here. The middle of the y's is at 7, and or y1 is at negative 1, so it's over here on the left. And if you look at how many spaces there are between negative 1 and 7, they're 8 units. So they're 8 units from the end point on the left going up to the midpoint at 7. Now if I want to figure out what's over here on the other end point, I can jump 8 units once again and add that 8 units onto the 7, and I get 15. Now, I definitely think, and that's why too, I definitely think that algebra is easier for me personally, but I've met students who love to visualize this. So if you prefer the visual method, as long as you're explaining it, you're all good to go.